As explained in the first video, iron is both good and bad for you. It's a sort of Goldilocks substance for the body. Too little and you suffer from anemia, causing tiredness and making you out of breath easily. Too much and you are poisoned, and more importantly, slightly too much building up over years eventually leads to damaging all of the organs and early death from a disease of old age such as diabetes, heart disease, liver cancer, Alzheimer's, stiffness of the joints, etc. Yes, iron overload causes all these diseases, and usually it's these diseases which are the diagnosis and not the root cause, which can be iron overload. Just to be clear, the cause of these diseases of old age is not always iron overload, but iron overload is a significantly common and misunderstood cause. 12 months ago, I knew none of this, and I wanted to explain what happened to me over the last 12 months, to explain how you could check if you were suffering from iron overload. In my case, I suffer from an extreme form of iron overload because of genetic defect called hereditary hemochromatosis. This affects 1 in 200 Northern Europeans, or people descended from Northern Europeans. It happened because both my father and mother were carriers of the disease, but did not suffer from it. 1 in 20 Northern European people are carriers of the mutation. I got 2 gene mutations, one from each of my parents. This is the recessive gene mutation called C282Y. This is most common form. There is another mutation called H63D, which can give weaker symptoms when combined with C2H2Y also. When I got 2 of these, my fate was written that later in life I would suffer from iron overload. I am currently 62 years old and still have no obvious symptoms from the disease, but I do have it, and I'll explain how my doctors eventually proved this to be the case. Incidentally, 2 of my 3 brothers are carriers of the disease, as there is a 1 in 4 chance of each of the 4 sons having it. I was the 4th son and got the disease. Also, my wife does not have the gene mutation, but my 3 children now are carriers of the mutation. They probably will not suffer from hemochromatosis, but their children could if they marry another Northern European who is a carrier. Remember that 1 in 20 Northern European or persons of Northern European descent are carriers. So what is my story? 12 months ago I did a DNA test with Ancestry DNA to try and understand my family history. It wasn't specifically to find out have I had any genetic medical faults. I was curious about my medical issues, so I downloaded the DNA data from Ancestry and uploaded it to a website called promothes.com. You pay $12 to get to use it. The database is really an open source data system for the medical profession, and its findings could be quite shocking to people if you were to use it. Heed my warnings about seeing some worrying things in addition to telling you that you may have hemochromatosis. It told me that there were dangers of getting colon cancer. And remember, these are dangers. The warnings is lifestyle changes can negate the chance of suffering from them. The information about hemochromatosis is different from warnings over cancer. It's really a fact that I do have the recessive genes and should be checked for iron overload. Iron overload is a very treatable, as I will explain. The medical profession state there is a 70% chance that the recessive gene will cause hemochromatosis. I personally think this number is 70% is very misleading because iron overload is a cumulative effect which grows with age. So from 0 to 38, the chance of me having iron overload was near 0. As I got older, the chance that I ate whether or not I was a blood donor or a woman who menstruated, well, I'm not a woman, and I did not do much blood donation for much of my early life. But I also had another and different faulty gene, which caused something called my transferrin to be lower than the average person. Transferrin is a transporter of iron, and having less transferrin due to this other defect has meant I did not die in my 40s or 50s. This is why doctors quote 70% with the gene getting hemochromatosis. It depends on what you eat, what other genes are present, and your age. The reality was I had the gene mutations. So I went to my GP in the UK and said I might have hemochromatosis because I had the two mutations. My doctor nearly fell off his seat. He knew little about the DNA, but had heard of hemochromatosis. The DNA test suggested I have a blood test to measure the iron level in my blood. They actually measure something called ferritin, not the iron directly, because the iron level changes so much, and measuring ferritin gives a better measure. Ferritin is the iron storage protein. Where the body detects too much iron in the blood, it converts the iron into ferritin. He should also have measured the transferrin saturation at this stage, but he did not. Anyway, back to my result, and I had a ferritin level of 1000. The accepted level is 15 to 300. Below 15 I would be anemic, and above 300 is iron overload. Incidentally, many non-hemochromatosis sufferers have levels above 300, particularly if they're old. Two of my brothers are both over 400 because they have some inflammation and they are older than me. They don't have hemochromatosis. I think they should be treated for iron overload, but this currently is not happening as the medical profession do not address iron overload in a non-hemochromatosis patients at all. In my case, 1000 is a very strong indication of hemochromatosis. My doctor referred me to a liver specialist because liver disease is one of the first symptoms of hemochromatosis. Also, rare diseases are also always referred to specialists, even though hemochromatosis is not a rare disease. It is treated as a rare disease because it is rarely diagnosed. I really wanted to be treated for high ferritin level immediately because I was concerned how much damage it was doing to the medical system had yet to diagnose me for hemochromatosis, even though it was very clear to me at this stage I had it. I later found out that I was one of the first people in the UK to be investigated because of DNA test. Nearly everyone diagnosed with hemochromatosis was first looked at because they were suffering from other symptoms, and they were found to have a high ferritin level. I had no obvious bad symptoms. I was doing things in the wrong order, and they were not ready for me. It was a further 5 months before my diagnosis was confirmed by my specialist. When, after 3 months, they did the transferrin saturation measurement, they found it was only 60%. Over 50% is bad, but the hemochromatosis sufferer was supposed to have a level of 80%. According to my specialist doctor. The reason for this was that my second genetic defect of my transferrin being inefficient at carrying iron, the thing that made me have few hemochromatosis symptoms at the age of 62. However, the thing that confirmed my hemochromatosis was an MRI scan of my liver. They measured the iron level of my liver to be 8 milligrams per gram, where the healthy maximum is 2 milligrams per gram. i.e. I had 4 times the safe level of iron in my liver. The good news is that they said the liver was not damaged. I had no cirrhosis of the liver, and which is the first sign of a problem. The normal time for diagnosis of hemochromatosis is 10 years from first symptoms to diagnosis. In my case, I was diagnosed in 5 months with no major symptoms at all, although I knew it to be the case after 1 month of discovering my DNA result and then getting the blood test. As I said, I wanted to be treated for the dangerous high ferritin level of 1,000 immediately I discovered it. The treatment was called venesection in the UK and therapeutic phlebotomy in North America and Australia. But to you and me, it's simply bloodletting. Given merely a pint of blood as often as every week. My GP refused to do this because I was not undiagnosed and it was a rare disease only a specialist could treat. In defence of my GP, high ferritin levels can be caused by inflammation, and cancer is a common cause of high ferritin levels, although cancer can also cause anemia, and I'll describe this in another video. But even though inflammation elevates ferritin levels, a measure of 1,000 is really a clear-cut hemochromatosis, particularly as I had the DNA mutation for it. So, whilst waiting 3 months to see the specialist in the UK, we have to wait about 3 months for treatment, I decided to investigate hemochromatosis and look at what I could do. I thought about doing the venesection myself, but then I decided that it was too difficult and might actually be dangerous. What I did do was change my diet totally and increase exercise. And I'm going to go into detail about this in another video. The result of the diet and exercise was I lost 6 kilograms in weight over the last summer, which I later discovered was the release of fat from my organs actually increased my ferritin levels even more. When my next ferritin measurement was done, I had a level of 1400. I was also taking an off-the-shelf supplement called IP6, made from the husks of rice, which is known as a chelator of iron. Chelation is a method of removing iron from the body. This actually was removing some of the iron and was releasing more iron and increasing ferritin levels. In other words, I did not know what I was doing and probably damaging myself even more. Anyway, by November last year, my diagnosis was complete. My treatment using venesection by a qualified medical staff was started. I stopped the IP6 and my weight stabilised. Since then, my ferritin level has actually decreased steadily. I will be doing another video about diet, exercise and supplements. As a way into the diet, the next video is all about iron as a food additive. It's fascinating stuff because doctors have worried about anemia for such an extent it has caused untold damage due to iron overload in older people. The next video will be about food additives and the use of iron as a food additive because of the worries about anemia. Some countries like Denmark have completely banned food additives to things like breakfast cereals and flour, because if you add things like iron to food, it is no measure of how much iron you're actually taking in. So it's much better to have a dose defined in a pill rather than in food where there is no measure of how much food you're actually eating. And for this reason we'll explain why it's so bad to add iron as a food additive to flour and breakfast cereal in the next video.